welcome to a Halloween themed book review. So without further ado, let's just begin. And we are starting with Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. So this is a crime cat and mouse book. Basically, a psycho uses a stolen Mercedes to drive through a crowd of people and kills 8 of them. It's not really a mystery because you learn who the killer is quite quickly, as you do also follow his story and his POV. And the main storyline is how will the ex-detective find him and when. I actually couldn't put this book down. I've read a bunch of reviews and the overall consensus was that this wasn't like one of Stephen King's best works, that it was kind of sloppy, there were a lot of plot holes, but I personally found it very interesting, very gripping. I just wanted to know what was going to happen next. And while yes, there are certain plot holes and you can definitely see that some things happen and some people act a certain way just so they could be used to drive the plot in the direction Stephen King wants it to go. So some things don't make that much sense, but overall, I think it's a well-balanced book. I think all the little aspects of it work very well to create this very suspense-driven narrative. I love the character building. I think all the characters were written quite well. There was depth to them. You explored a lot of their motivations, their backstory, why they are the way they are. And I especially loved Holly. And I did love the psycho, not as a person, but just the way his character was built, because he was a very believable psycho. And to be fair, while I was reading the book, I didn't have time to stop and think about the plot holes and about what didn't really fit or make sense, because I just found it so interesting and I just kept on reading and reading and reading. I would say that makes a good story, that makes a good book. There is also a TV show about it and I watched it with my boyfriend, and while it was honestly quite different and some things were changed that I thought didn't really have to be changed and it made no sense to be changed, but overall the TV show was also good and my boyfriend enjoyed it because he wanted to know what was going to happen next. And it was really fun when I had actually finished the book and we were watching the show and I was explaining how it was different from the book and what happened in the book. So that was a fun couple thing to do. I am looking forward to reading the next book in the Bill Hodges series and at some point Holly, but just not right now because I think I need a little bit of a break from psychos, because this one was heavy, you know, like some scenes were a bit, they weren't gruesome, there wasn't anything that was like really explicit or like gory or whatever, like it wasn't that type of disturbing, it was more psychologically disturbing. If you have read it, you probably can guess what I'm talking about. And especially that watching that in the TV show was just, ugh. This one gets a 4 out of 5. Next up, we have Foul Days by Genoveva Dimova. This is a breath of fresh air if you're looking for something new in the fantasy genre. Its lore and monsters are rooted in Bulgarian folklore, with Samodivas, Karakonjuli, and Upirs. It's written in English by a Bulgarian author and it's published by Tor Books, and I feel weirdly proud to see a Bulgarian author published by such a well-known fantasy publisher. Now, while I do love the world building, I do think it lacks character building, and it's simply because I don't think enough time was spent just sitting with the characters, you know? And that kind of left me not liking anyone. It's a very fast-paced book, which I didn't particularly enjoy because it didn't give me enough time to connect with any of the characters. It was like we were constantly rushing to the next thing. We are doing this, now we're doing this, now we're doing this. And it's written in the third-person POV, but it only follows Kosara, the main character, which I think was a missed opportunity, because if you're writing from a third-person POV, then that really gives you the option to explore other people's POVs and kind of go deeper into what other characters are thinking and doing, you know? I am looking forward to the second book, which I think it's coming out tomorrow. I should double check that, and if it is, then I'm gonna order it. So I do love the world the author created, and I love that she's introducing the world to Bulgarian folklore. And because there's so many things in this book that kind of make me nostalgic for home, it does make me feel warm inside, and I want to read more and I want to support the author. But while the biggest charm of the book for me is that it tries to introduce Bulgarian culture to its readers, I think it lacks enough descriptive writing to properly do so. And I say that because if you look at the official art for the book, then you will notice traditional Bulgarian elements on pottery, on clothes, but none of that is actually described in the book. And if it were, then I think it really would have added like that extra element of world building that would have made it, I would even say, exceptional. And I think this is really important because as I was reading it at the beginning, I actually wasn't imagining any of that as part of the world. Like, I wasn't imagining our traditional clothes. I wasn't imagining any of those like traditional Bulgarian elements that if you look at the art, they are there. And the idea is that they should be there. Like, that's how the world should look. But I wasn't imagining any of that because it wasn't mentioned or described at all. I also think it's interesting that the Bulgarian edition of the book is translated by someone else, not the actual author, which is just kind of funny to me, I don't know. But if it were actually translated by the author herself, then I would have bought the Bulgarian copy, because it's actually very pretty, because it has sprayed edges. So that was a bit of a bummer, like a tiny bit of a bummer. And honestly, the one thing that I will really remember from this book is the translation of a Bulgarian children's song, which I read out to my boyfriend and his friend because it was really funny. So for all of my Bulgarians watching, the translation is the following. Try and guess the song. I'm pretty sure you'll guess it. Hey hands, hey the two of you. One of you washes the other, and then both of you wash the face. It's wholesome. Honestly, okay, it's a chill read, it's wholesome, it's very appropriate for the Halloween season. It's not a scary horror type of Halloween book. It's a witchy, dark, monstrous type of book. And I do recommend it. So Foul Days gets a 3 out of 5. And now that I gave my review, I'm realizing that I didn't give you a summary of what the book is about because I jumped straight into the review. Sorry about that, I think I just feel very passionate about this one. So basically the main character is a witch. And in this world, a witch's power comes from her shadow. And our main character basically gets her shadow kind of stolen. And this book is her journey of trying to get her shadow back during the Foul Days. And the Foul Days are the first, I think it was 12 days of the month, when was it the land? Something. The world hasn't yet been baptized. I'm not good with religion. And so in those 12 days before the whole baptizing happens, you have monsters running amok. I'm doing a very bad job at explaining this. Okay, she loses her shadow, she has to get her shadow back, there's monsters running around, there's a detective helping her, and the big bad wolf is her ex. He's not a wolf. It's just, the phrase, the big bad wolf. It's the world building, okay? The world building is key. And I do love that at the end of the book you get a practical guide to monsters. So you get like all of the monsters and what is it, how to recognize it, how to protect yourself from it, and what to remember. You can tell a lot of thought has gone into this book. Please read it. Let's support the author, especially if you're Bulgarian. Let's support her. This is a great achievement. Honestly, this is a dream come true to get your book published by such a well-known fantasy publisher. Kudos to you, Genoveva. Good job. Honestly, good job. Some light was necessary. It's starting to get dark way too early now. So next up, we have The Picture of Dorian Gray. I actually wasn't sure what I wanted to read next, so I asked on Instagram because I am extremely indecisive apparently when it comes to books. The choice was between Dracula, Frankenstein, Camilla, and Dorian Gray, and 44% voted for Dorian, so here we are. Is there a point in me explaining what the book is about? Has anyone not heard of Dorian Gray? Probably a lot of people haven't read it, but I'm pretty sure mostly everyone has heard of him. Long story short, it's a young, beautiful man with a cursed portrait that gets old instead of him. That is the premise, basically. This book is a very deep exploration into the human soul, I would say. It did make me think a lot about the way I personally view youth and influence. I don't really know what to say about this book. I read that a lot of people complain about Lord Henry and all of his monologues and his teachings and stuff, and how he keeps on rambling. And they also complain about the writing style, how flowery it is or how pretentious it is. And I don't really agree with those points because honestly, Oscar Wilde has a really beautiful style of writing. I kind of wish modern authors still wrote this way, or at least try to. Some do, and I absolutely love them, but I guess I'm just someone who really enjoys reading complex and wordy sentences and learning new vocabulary. Maybe because English is not my first language, so I really appreciate a well-structured sentence in proper English. Maybe. But anyway, on the point of Henry, I think his thoughts and opinions were actually my favorite thing about this book. I've underlined so many of the things he said, although admittedly most of it is in the beginning of the book, but I've underlined so much. Not because I necessarily agree with the things he's saying, but because I just found them very interesting, and some of them felt very relevant to the current world we are living in. And as I was reading this, I thought that not a lot has actually changed, and maybe a lot of the things that are discussed in this book are just a part of human nature, and they'll never change. I say the main point, after all, is about the power of influence. And so I'm just going to read you this quote. Because to influence a person is to give him one's own soul. He does not think his natural thoughts or burn with his natural passions. His virtues are not real to him. His sins, if there are such things as sins, are borrowed. He becomes an echo of someone else's music, an actor of a part that has not been written for him. The aim of life is self-development. To realize one's nature perfectly, that is what each of us is here for. The picture of Dorian Gray gets a 5 out of 5. Bibi? Do you think you will like Dorian Gray? Would you like to stay young forever? No? Well, Bibi and I share the same opinion that staying young forever might not be the best thing in the world. And debauchery is for the people who are utterly bored of living. And finally, we have this beautiful baby, The Complete Cthulhu Mythos Tales by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, the reason why I picked up Lovecraft is because Stephen King mentions him a lot, and I honestly just got curious. Now, I know Lovecraft is one of the fathers of horror, and he is the inspiration behind a lot of video games and just, book characters and movies and TV shows and whatever. I wanted to know why he is such a staple name. And honestly, I thought that this would be the right time to do it, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have picked him up, or I wouldn't have been so much into reading him, because again, this is not the type of genre I really read. But then once I started reading Lovecraft, I quickly found out that he doesn't really feel like a horror author to me. He's more of a sci-fi author. Because all of his creatures and horrors and gods are pretty much rooted in the idea that they come from space. So this for me is very much a sci-fi book more than a horror book. Now, for full transparency, I actually haven't finished reading this, because at the end of the day, Lovecraft actually hasn't written a full proper novel. It's predominantly short stories. They were published year after year, and you would read a short story, then you'll get a break, then you would read another short story, then you would get a break. But when you're reading them like this in a collection, they do kind of tend to get repetitive. And when I say repetitive, I mean in the way that you quickly find out that there is a pattern. And when I say a pattern, I mean that you generally have like a scientist or an explorer that meets some type of like usually indigenous people or people from a poor area, and there's like a type of myth or a legend about some creatures or death, and then they research that, or they go out and explore that, or they hear someone's story about what they have experienced and then they retell it. So there's a lot of repetitive elements to Lovecraft's stories. That doesn't make them bad in any way. The writing of these stories is amazing. The way Lovecraft uses the English language to create the atmosphere and the setting and just the creatures and this overwhelming feeling of dread, of how inconsequential you are as a human being. It's mind-blowing, honestly, and I can definitely see why he is such a staple for horror. Not just horror, just generally as an author. I think his writing is amazing, truly. And honestly, there's no way that I can give this anything less than a 5-star. But if you look at individual short stories, then that is when the individual ratings would come in play, I would say. So far, there was one story that I really struggled with, and I only started finding interesting right at the end, and it's one of his longer stories, which was The Whisperer in Darkness. That one was tough to get through. And my favorite so far is The Curse of Ig, which he wrote together with Zila Bishop. That one I really, really enjoyed. Some of the short stories are quite short, like a page long, or a little bit more. Like Azathoth is just a page. That is it. And I do want to read all of his short stories, honestly, but I think it's just going to take a long time, because I think I do need to kind of space them out a little bit more. Again, just because they get repetitive. One of my friends and I, we actually have an Excel sheet with all of his short stories, so we can tick them off and just know we've been through all of them. But just look at how beautiful this edition is. Look at it. It is glorious. Hello? Like, come on. It has like golden pages. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It also came with a poster, which is now stuck on our fridge. Because Halloween, even when Halloween ends, I'm gonna keep it there because it adds like an extra color to the kitchen. Because it's like a green Cthulhu poster, which my mom also liked, which was surprising because they thought she would be like, "Ah, what is this thing? Why is this on the fridge? It's so creepy." But no, she likes it, so it's gonna stay on the fridge. Look at this. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It's a Barnes & Noble special edition. Okay, again, I'm rambling, but it's also like really nice to just like open because the pages basically stay open, which is really freaking important for a book, because I absolutely hate the Penguin Classics where you kind of have to just, you know, it's like this. It's like this, and you have to kind of force them open, and it's just annoying. But yes, anyway. These are the books I read for this Halloween season. If you have any recommendations that are not Stephen King or classics, then please put them in the comments so I will know what to look out for next Halloween. Next month I was planning on doing the Rory Gilmore reading challenge, but I am dying to read Brandon Sanderson. I need to finish the Stormlight Archive. I need to finish the other Mistborn trilogy. I need to read Brandon Sanderson, okay? I've been holding out. I've been restraining myself for the past 2-3 months. I can't do this anymore. So, I'd say the Rory Gilmore challenge will be for next autumn. Anyway, thank you for watching. I think I rambled way too much for this video. This was completely unscripted, which is probably not a good thing, but it is what it is. Enjoy your Halloween. Enjoy the wonderful season that is autumn, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye bye. Yes, honey, are you getting signals from the spaceship? Oh.